Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Gascally Stamus from GearWorks.com and the E2KG Network back with another episode of E2KGn30. Here with me, as always, I have one other member of the team of co-hosts on the E2KG Network here on the new show with me tonight, Mr. DBQ Hams. How you doing, DB?
I'm good. And yourself, sir? This is a different night for us, but still we are here and committed to our 30 minutes of gaming news.
What is funny is it is a different night, and we are both in different rooms.
Yes. So what brought you to your other room here before we dive into the news?
Yeah, so I started a new job this week, and one of the things I did on the new job was I had to do some scribbling and jotting down and determining what I wanted my setup at work to be. And as a result, it caused me to spool and spin a little bit about the interrelation with my setup here at home, particularly with standing desks and some other things. Also this week, I think I mentioned on the show earlier this week, I've shot some out-of-the-box episodes, and I'm in the midst of some hardware reviews. And one of the problems I've been having with those and with podcasts is the Geek Command Center was set up very well for gaming and doing some other things. It was not set up very well for podcasting and shooting video. All the desks were against the walls, and so it was impossible to get a camera on a tripod behind the workbench without pulling it out away from the wall, which was always an exercise in near calamity. So I've actually pivoted all the work tables out so they are actually T-boned to the wall, and some of the tables are back-to-back. I have a large walking space through the center of the studio, so like right now I have the camera that I'm using for webcam set on the other side of my monitors because I have another lab bench behind this table now, so I think things will hopefully be a little easier from here on out.
Nice. Well, that's so good. I'm curious to see what that creates then in terms of content-wise. So
yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. So are you in temporary digs right now still?
Still in temporary digs. Yep. Tomorrow, over the weekend, doing some new work down in my basement. Actually using the time to finish up some stuff that wasn't finished the first time. So, but we'll keep moving around, but we'll keep podcasting in the process. So let's dive into this week's news.
Yeah, no doubt. So this was a pretty interesting week. By the way, this is episode number 33 for the week ending the 9th of March, 2018. We are recording on the 9th of March, one day later than our normally scheduled programming. So first up, we're going to be talking about the... I'm sorry, I'm still moving screens around a little bit here. We're talking about the PS4 firmware update 5.5, which dropped earlier this week. Fairly interesting, however, not super applicable to me. The big thing that came out was a host of new options available for parental controls, which I found pretty interesting, given some other stories and some events around the country this week. You can look at your child's total playtime. By the way, I sourced this particular reference story from Gear Nuke. Good for them that they were very highly ranked on N4G this week for this news story. They're a smaller site, and I've followed them for a while, so again, good for them. But you can look at your child's total playtime, limit how long your kid plays per day. They get a very annoying alert when their time is running out. You can actually set the system to force log them out, and I think shut down once their playtime is up. Basically, it implements a very Amazon Kindle playtime-like set of parental controls with a lot of different options to them. Now, the things that I personally found interesting, I am a parent. I'm not worried about the parental controls because my kids just aren't allowed to play the PlayStation 4. They're younger. Of interest to me personally was you have super sampling now available to improve image quality on games on the PlayStation 4 when it's connected to something that is less than a 2K TV. So there are this weird sort of in-between TVs that are half the resolution of 4K, but are above 1080. If you're on a 2K or below TV, you now have super sampling available, which is weird. I thought that was there before. I thought that was the whole promise of the PlayStation 4, was that it was supposed to make every game look better. And I thought we went through this evolution where initially developers could implement it, but then I thought this global super sampling mode had already been available to make every game look better, regardless of whether or not the developers implemented it. But it could be that it was implemented, but it was still in beta and had never been rolled out into production yet, but it is now there. Apparently, you can do some customization of logos and backgrounds for teams. There's some changing of the verbiage of online friends to friends, music playback functionality improved, events for your team profile, PlayStation VR stuff, deleting notifications. Hallelujah! You can now delete notifications. So I've been plagued since PlayStation 3 days by that stuff just remaining persistently in your queue and never being able to get rid of it. And you can also view a list of players that you follow, and I think you can, so kind of Twitter-like functionality there. So I don't know, anything here that you find exciting, DB?
Yeah, a couple of things actually that I find interesting. So the parental piece I think is nice. I don't know that there's a real big demand for it at this stage in the cycle, in the console's life cycle, right? Like when consoles come out, usually that's when you get more of the parental control, kind of using it as a marketing pitch. But it's something that I appreciate as a parent of two older sons. One of the things I love about the Xbox and Microsoft is that once a week I'll get my both my sons have gamer tags and they're under my main tag, and so I'll get an email with their playtime and what they've been playing for the week, which is really nice. And so I think that this is another option here. The fact that you can view and manage your child's playtime from your smartphone means that parents have the option of kind of keeping track, or at least being aware. And I think as we'll come back to in another story, being aware of what our kids are playing is an important piece. And so the super sampling thing, I think, is also, as someone who has a 1080p setup to their PlayStation Pro, I did not realize that this was coming. So I'm going to kind of play with it. The only thing I've been able to do is a boost mode, and then there is a game by game on how they take advantage of it. So there is no universal application. So the super sampling here means that some things that don't necessarily already do that, it may give me a reason to come back to some games that haven't seen an update in the past, some older PlayStation 4 games, and see what that ends up looking like with the super sampling. So for something that didn't have a lot of fanfare and kind of got tweaked out, it's an interesting timing in terms of talking about parental controls at the same time when our next news story is happening as well.
Yeah, so this is a game and a news story that we've kind of been kicking around for quite some time within the E2KG Flock conversation channels, but we haven't really been mentioning it too much on the news show or on the discussion show. So you want to take us through what we know about this particular franchise and title, and actually what other? Okay, DB, I think you're muted. Of course, that didn't help that I was muted when I tried to tell you that.
Oh, well, see, I told you all about that game that you were really excited for. It was great. Silent game is perfect. See, this is what happens when we record on another night. Anyhow, I had a transition, but oh well. So we got two games that are not a big secret that they're coming out, and I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on them because they were both kind of expected properties, right? That Call of Duty Black Ops was announced that it's official. It's coming out, Black Ops 4. It's going to be out in October. It looks actually like it's going to be coming out early October, which there's already been some news stories kind of about how it's trying to get out of the way of Red Dead coming out late in the year in terms of the juggernaut that 2K's game may be. And then Ubisoft's Tom Clancy's The Division 2 is official. There's been, in the last couple of weeks, there's been kind of a ramp up where Massive has been hiring and starting to announce that they're working with some other studios. So I think there's again, these are both Division 2 doesn't necessarily have any timeline to it yet. So we will see what that does and what they do, but they're continued to promise a couple other updates that are coming out in April, including a 4K update for Xbox X. So right now it doesn't do anything on the Xbox X in terms of the Division, and that will improve at least give that a nice graphical overface as those players have been playing it. So The Division, I was one of my games to come back to, or potentially come back to, in last week's Pick'em show for me. So the fact that it's getting a 4K update means that maybe it's something I might, even though it wasn't picked, it might still be something I come back to later on. So any excitement here for you on these, or is this just business as usual and sequels as usual?
Well, I wanted to ask you, so were you surprised by the news of the Division 2 announcement?
Kind of. So I'm not surprised that they're going to do it, right? This was the fastest selling new IP in console history. I think the surprise piece of it is that it's a numbered sequel. I think in some ways with what Ubisoft has done with Rainbow Six and kind of continue to put out seasons, and they're in their third year of support there, and it's continuing to sell strong. I think that's where it was all the support that they've given to Wildlands. I was curious to see how they were going to release a new box copy, right? Like they needed to put something out on shelves for sales, but was that going to be like a Taken King type of refresh this fall with all the new content bundled together with a new part of New York, or as a numbered sequel, they potentially could go to a whole new area of where out of New York itself and go to another city that was hit with this virus. So it opens up a lot more for them. So yeah, I think I was surprised at the level of the announcement. Let's say that. So, but Black Ops 3 or 4, that was kind of expected. It would have been a shock if it wasn't that, actually. So, any other final thoughts there before we keep moving?
Yeah, my only really quick thing is I was personally surprised by the news of the Division 2. I didn't think that game performed that well over its full life cycle. There was a positive swing up front, then there was an extreme reduction and walking back from that game by a lot of the player community, was my perception. And then there was a resurgence as they improved and started cranking the wheel again. But I just didn't think that was where they were going to go. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Really interesting to see how they play that at E3.
Yes, I agree.
But a lot of these things have been linked, right? So we started off talking about parental controls, which enables parents, if they want, to shield their children from certain content, or at least spending time in certain content in video games. Then we talked about one of the games that is perceived as being very violent, that whole Call of Duty series. Now it's time to talk about something that's been going on the national stage between the White House and the video games industry. So you want to start us off and take us through that dialogue?
Yeah, I'll take us through that dialogue, right? I mean, so this is something that's generating some press, at least, in the gaming circles. But I think there's also a piece here for us as gamers to be aware of how the media and politicians are viewing us and our hobby. And so I think this was one of the things in light of the violence, the school violence over the last 2-3 weeks ago now. One of the president's responses a week ago was about blaming violent video games. And he announced that he was going to meet with industry leaders. And there was never really an announcement until just the day before this happened about who those industry leaders would actually be. And so we do have that list. Okay, this list came out yesterday, and the meeting took place yesterday as well. It was very short. It was only an hour-long meeting. So again, we're going to report this as news and not editorialize as we go. So, but one of the big things of who was there was what that representation was. So you've got Strauss Zelnick from Take-Two, right? The publishers of the Grand Theft Auto series. You've got Patricia Vance from the ESRB. You've got the ESA president, Mike Gallagher, and ZeniMax, who publishes Bethesda's games, Robert Altman. And then you had a couple senators, Senator Rubio and Representative Hartzell from Missouri, and Roby. And then you had some video game violent activists in terms of parent groups, things like that. You had a lieutenant colonel who's written a couple books, but again, not a researcher, but concerned citizen. And so you have other people from the Parent Television Council, Melissa Henson, and also Brett Basel from the Media Research Center. So again, groups and agencies that have been talking about links between violent media and real-world violence. And again, I think one of the pieces here is this was an hour discussion. This was a piece where they did not have any psychologists or sociologists, any type of researchers and medical professionals that have been doing the research about the potential link, whether it's any type of causality between violence and video games. And I think the other piece here that we don't see is the discussion or the reality of the 2011 Supreme Court California case ruling about violent video games not having enough evidence to support a causality and are being covered under freedom of speech in terms of just another media. And so there's a lot here that could potentially be unpacked, but I think one of the things that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on is actually the meeting itself, because the meeting was only an hour. There were not cameras involved. This was not a meeting that was open for the press. It was relatively short. And I think that the relatively shortness of it and the fact that it wasn't open to the press is also something to keep in mind about the optics of this meeting and how much of it was really about trying to point a finger, or even more so trying to look for a solution to real world violence. But I think it also, by the sheer nature of the closedness and the shortness of that meeting, it also provides it as not quite a scapegoat, but a nice way to say that the administration was doing something and was concerned about children, and so they had this 1 hour meeting to say things are bad. This is not new, right? This is, we can go back to the mid 90s with Senator Lieberman and congressional hearings. This is not unique to Republicans or Democrats. We can look at 2013 when then Vice President Joseph Biden had a very similar meeting and talking about video game violence and concerns about that. And so I think that all of this is something that we should be aware of in terms of what else is going on within our hobby, but it's also something that we should come prepared for in terms of knowing the real research that's out there as well. That there is enough research consistently. There have been a number of meta-analysis articles, which means basically they're taking a number of individual research articles and research studies about the link between, or the potential link between, video game violence and real world violence. There are additional studies that talk about video game violence and aggression levels, and there's a layer and a whole number of pieces here, and I could go more, and we might actually, but all of those articles, again, the causation and the causality is not, there's no evidence there to support that. There is evidence there to support that video game violence increases aggression levels, but there's also research to support that watching football or watching an action movie also increases aggression levels. And so, that yes, this is something that we should be aware of and we should be informed about so that we can have those conversations, but we should also not look for an easy, quick finger to point in terms of both video game violence and real world violence, that it's, as everything is, it's also a complicated issue. So I don't really want to go on any further than that, because if our politicians were not going to give it time, we don't necessarily need to give it time either. So I'm going to move on, and Iglesias is back here to tell us a little bit and give me his thoughts, or to they had a little highlight reel that the president showed, which actually, I gotta be honest, when I watched it, I didn't know all those games, and some of those were from 2009, 2010. it was an interesting combination of what was shown and how it actually depicts the current state of the game industry as well, or how it doesn't depict that.
Yeah, I agree. And I apologize if I went out repeating anything that you went over. Just I had to step away to check in on one of my kids. But yeah, there's questionable content in the I'll call it the sizzle reel, I guess maybe, about whether or not those games were really relevant. A lot of those games, I think I noticed a couple that were really bad games that hardly anyone played. Some of them, that whole Call of Duty airport scene. And look, I admit that airport scene was, I don't want to say bad. It was certainly of shocking content value, but not unlike anything that you would see in a movie. Like, how many times have we seen a movie or a television show that depicts a character who's undercover, who's being forced to do something violent, take a lives, inherently bad, in an effort to not blow their cover. So, but it was very visceral to play it. And actually, the first couple times, I think we talked about this. Like, I tried to not kill anyone, and you will fail the mission, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, it was interesting in kind of how it was poised, but I also question its relevance. It is what it is. I guess maybe if it was poised to try and accomplish an objective. You went through the part about the actual meetings. The comment I was going to make, and I apologize if you addressed this already, was what I thought was very curious about the whole meeting itself was the attendance. I found, so you have 2K there, obviously, because of Grand Theft Auto. Bethesda, I'm like, I don't normally, like, if somebody says ultra-violence and accuses games of inciting violence with people, Bethesda is not the first company that leaps to mind.
So let me throw out Bethesda. One, I think, one of the things two of the games in the sizzle reel were Bethesda, right? One of them was Fallout 4, with kind of its, Fallout 3 certainly was guilty of this as well in terms of the blood that would spew forth during slowdown times, and Wolfenstein. But Bethesda, again, we're talking about Bethesda, Maryland. We're in a relatively close proximity to DC. We are also that on the board of ZeniMax is Trump's brother. And so potentially there's an access availability, or at least a knowledge and awareness of that company. So I think that may be another piece there as well.
And one of the things I was curious about as well, and we can certainly move on. We didn't want to dive too deeply into this. I thought the thing that we don't know is everyone who was actually invited, right? I wonder very much if what was announced was simply the people who had accepted, and how much of the video game industry were invited and may have refused. It seems that as widely diverse and disparate as the video game industry is across developers and publishers, it seems very strange to me to only have the heads of 2 publishing companies there. That is not a representative population of the games industry by any means. So I'm kind of curious, about how the sausage was made on that one. But thanks so much for carrying on. Well, I had to step away, DB.
Yeah, no problem. We've covered it, and that's as I said earlier, I think I don't want to give it any more time than if the politicians are only going to give the meeting an hour. We don't need to give this discussion a whole lot of time either.
Right. So on to something that definitely probably excited gamers more was the announcement that Super Smash Bros. Is coming to Nintendo Switch this year of all things. That floored me. We've been looking forward to this announcement. We all knew it was coming, but the fact that they played it almost exactly as a lot of people said they would and should, and announced that the game is arriving this year. Probably this is a fall release. This is probably the Super Mario Odyssey release for 2018. But in particular, the series creator, Masahiro Sakurai, is going to be involved. He has not been named as the actual director or creative director, producer, I think, which were the roles he fulfilled before. But he has basically helmed this series since its inception. This is the 4th iteration of the game, and he will be coming back. Now, he actually suffered some type of, I think, fatiguing arm injury from overuse in the production of the 3rd game. But he did go in for surgery. He seems to have made some level of recovery and will be returning to some level of duty on this game. Now, in the past, it was. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Fifth. This is the fifth Smash Brothers, right? Super Nintendo, GameCube, Wii U. Yep, fifth. But I had read also that there was 4 somewhere. If he was, maybe it's his 4th. No, but he's been involved from the beginning because he was Hal.
The wording on the Game Informer article is a little wonky. Not making that as an excuse for not knowing my history, but I've not been a lifelong Nintendo fan. I guess part of the curiosity for me is I don't particularly consider the Wii U and 3DS versions as separate games, right?
No, I think they're the same. Yeah, so that's the 4th iteration there.
Okay, all right. Yep. But in the past, it has been the late Satoru Iwata who kind of convinced and coerced and cajoled and kept Sakurai involved at past points when he kind of was ready to move on. Of course, Iwata is not there now, so there's some curiosity on what his exact role in the production is going to be, but it's good to hear that he is involved. Well played, Nintendo Direct 2, with a lot of misdirection in that trailer as well.
That was a fun announcement, and I think the big. So, were you surprised that there was a Smash Brothers coming? Or are you surprised that it's a new Smash Brothers and not a port of version?
I was surprised that they announced a release date of a specific year, and that it's this year, the first time that they confirmed the existence of the game. I was hoping that that's what would happen, but I wouldn't have been surprised. I wouldn't have been surprised if they would have just announced it and not given a date at all. This time, the first time out of the box. So what surprised and wowed me was that they confirmed the existence of the game, and they stated the release date is 2018, which is soon in Nintendo terms.
Yeah, this suddenly becomes their go-to game for E3 in terms of what's going to be there. So, well, let's run through the rest of the list in terms of what other things are coming out, or at least were announced at this Nintendo Direct. All right, we've got Mario Tennis that's coming out this June. They spent some time on that, went through a number of the options and play modes. It certainly has more depth than the last time that there was a Mario Tennis game on the Wii U. Splatoon 2 is going to get an update, and it's going to get also some DLC, so $20 DLC for the story expansion. As my family has played through the story mode, they're excited about this. A couple of rumors that were coming in terms of ports, things like South Park Fractured But Whole, and also Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. The one that was on PlayStation 4 last year is now coming out this summer. Both of those coming April. South Park is coming April, where Crash is coming this summer. We also have another port coming out with Okami. Okami HD came out in December for Xbox and PlayStation. Then we got a couple indies here with Little Nightmares, and we've got we also have the Undertale, a little bit of announcement that it's coming eventually, which was kind of a cute way to do that. And then a little bit more on Dark Souls, the remaster that's coming. And then a couple new games for the Switch. Octopath Traveler is coming out. Again, we knew that, but it finally gets a release date. We have a little more info on the new Travis touched on the new No More Heroes, which is Travis Strikes Again, which is going to be a bunch of kind of small indie game or small games within it. And then a Sushi Striker kind of puzzle action game with kind of a cartoony sushi matching aspect to it for the Switch. And then we've got a couple surprise of this for me was how many 3DS games we ended up getting announced during this Nintendo Direct as well. So a remake of Luigi's Mansion for the GameCube, a new WarioWare game, a port of which is both to Switch and to the 3DS, and so there were some things there, and a new Bowser's Inside Story. I wonder if they're going to use the same engine for Superstar Saga, but so a lot more 3DS content than I kind of expected. Anything there that jumped out to you in terms of surprise or excitement, or just the fact that there's a continued drip of content is a good sign for a console's second life?
Not surprising. I mean, the Switch just is the Switch is kind of it's kind of the casino machine of consoles, right? You go up, you pull the arm, and like 30 games keep spilling out. But my question for you is, given that lineup between the Nintendo Directs earlier this year and this one, we've got a big game. We've got a big game. Do you think this lineup is comparable to last year's? I see the one big game, but I don't know that I see kind of the Gin Rummy approach of last year, right? We're like, here's Zelda, right? Here's Splatoon 2. Here's ARMS, right? And like they kept laying down like one big card, like spread out. I don't know that this lineup for this year looks, feels, and smells the same.
No, I don't think it does, nor do I think it really has to. I think the reality of having a Zelda and a Mario in its first year means that those are going to be games that continue to sell year after year. Actually, just tonight, my family and I were playing Mario Kart, right? So there are some of those titles that came out in the first year that will continue to sell because they're the evergreen Nintendo franchises. I think what they needed to do and what this Direct does is show that for those people that have already consumed that content, that there's more coming. It's that it is kind of, whether it's a steady drip of one big title and a bunch of indie titles coming out on a monthly basis, or it's the casino slot machine approach. I really want a slot machine like that goes, right? That comes out where all you have to do is pull it once and just keep spewing stuff out at you. But I think that what it does is, for those people that have already invested in the Switch, those 10 million of us over its first year, that it shows that there's still stuff to keep playing. And I think the thing that it's probably missing, and the thing that may come when we hit E3 or another announcement before then in terms of getting out in front of it, are what do we get as third-party titles? You know, what do we get that comes out that shows that now from other publishers, now that this system, and there's reports coming out this week that it could have a larger market share this year in 18 than the Xbox. What does that do for publishers, and how do they respond to that? So no, it's not surprising that there's not a whole lot of big titles, because they've kind of already played those cards. And so the Smash Brothers card at the end really was their trump card that they've been holding off on. So.
Right, and like you said, we got to get the third-party stuff right. I saw that notation that it may exceed the Xbox, but if it exceeds the Xbox with only 5 or 6 first-party titles that the Nintendo faithful want to play, then it's just another Nintendo console all over again, right? If it doesn't have the repeat, year after year, ongoing build-up of continuously progressing content, like the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox, then to me it's just another Nintendo console. And what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to wind up selling my Switch, right? Because that's what I wound up doing with my Wii, because we got some third-party stuff up front, and then the well dried up, and it was nothing but first-party, and it was 2 to 4 games a year, and that doesn't cut it for me. So we'll see how this progresses. I need a big pump, right, from E3. So I think that is going to do it for us. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining in. We do appreciate it. We're off the one night, but we did keep it to 30 minutes roughly this time. We do really appreciate you joining in. Please like, subscribe, keep up with our other shows on the channel. Keep coming back and checking us out week after week. Follow us on Twitter. We would definitely appreciate it. That's going to do it for us on behalf of myself, DBQ Hams, and the rest of the E2KG network. Thanks so much for joining in on this Friday night, one night off from our regular show. We'll be back next week, hopefully on our regular programming schedule. Thanks again. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.